Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Bay Quinte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand up here once again on behalf of the residents of Bay of Quinte. Canada's Bank of Canada Governor finally admitted this week that inflation is a made-in-Canada problem, not just a global phenomenon. Quote from Mr. Macklin this week in a speech to the Chamber of Commerce in Halifax: "Some of this inflation reflects global developments that we don't control, but inflation in Canada increasingly reflects what's happening in Canada." This echoes former Deputy Minister of Finance for the Liberal Party and former Bank of Canada David Dodge this week, or 2 weeks ago, who stated that inflation was increasingly a made-in-Canada problem. This unjust inflation is hurting Canadian families, and for Canada, a G7 nation, it is embarrassing that we're seeing our families affected by the lack of the essentials, the very basics that this government, this country should be looking after: housing, food, their paychecks, filling job shortages, and that includes our military and housing for our military. This made-in-Canada inflation problem is costing the average Canadian family. It's costing the average family with 2 children $11,000 a year. This inflation problem, this crisis in housing and healthcare and food shortages is really affecting our families to the core. Food bank usage is up. In my riding, it's up 30%, which correlates to a 30% rise in grocery bills. We have housing, a double of homelessness in my region, double, 500,000 alone in Belleville. And we have farmers who are struggling to pay their bills. We have this government's announcement of next year, which will be a turducken of taxes during Thanksgiving, triple of taxes, including the carbon tax, and for a lot of Canadian businesses, rises in interest rates as we see the bank trying to combat this inflation. Shouldn't Canada, a G7 nation, need to look after the basics? Shouldn't the government, but it's been proven that more money chasing less goods causes inflation, a made-in-Canada problem, have to look after the basics for its citizens? You know, that means that Canadian families right now are choosing between food, heat, medication, after-school activities. And don't they feel, and don't we feel, that government should have to do the same? That the government needs to choose where to put its money, to be more active in investing in Canada and ensuring that we're looking after the basics, creating more hospital beds, doctors and nurse practitioners, you know, making sure that our natural resources like our liquid nitrified gas can go to Europe and it can create jobs and bring money into this country. You know, should we make sure that we create housing for our military and ensure that we don't have a gap of 3,600 families waiting for housing in our military bases, right? And shouldn't we ensure that Canadians take home a greater paycheck? You know, we're stuck here in Parliament debating and having on our side to say no to dental care in Canada, a G7 nation, because we've spent so much money except for taking care of the basics in Canada. You know, we need to make sure when we're spending money that we invest into Canadian basics and the necessities that are helping all families all the time. And that means we're going to have to say no, just as families are saying no when it comes to their own bills, and some of them saying no to food or to housing, after-school activities, or anything else that Canadians need to make choices on for their families each and every day. And it is absolutely disheartening. You know, government's #1 job is to make sure it's taking care of Canadians' basic needs and ensure that when we're spending money, we invest in those things that Canadians will find helpful and that Canadians will find helps their daily lives and looks after their families. I want to talk about those things. For housing, we have 500 homelessness in the city of Belleville. And you know, it takes one step to become homeless. Sometimes it's a domestic dispute. Sometimes it's a check that was missed on rental. Sometimes it's alcohol and addictions. And you know, it's 3 steps to come out of homelessness. It means that we look at a shelter. It should be the basic need for all Canadians that we at least have a roof over their heads, which would be a shelter. But second is transitionary housing. We have an incredible transitional house in Belleville by the shelter called Grace Inn, and it's called the Shiloh House. And it's 6 rooms, and they are helping homeless out of shelter transition into rental. And they can actually help up to 60 units, and it's not easy. They have transitional programs for mental health and addiction. They have help with employment and keeping a job, and they're ensuring that people are looking after themselves. And I toured it a few weeks ago, and it's empowering to talk to the individuals who are finding themselves into a transitional house and eventually will find rental and find homes for themselves. But it's not as simple as just throwing money at the situation and thinking that's going to fix our homeless situation. The very basis of having a shelter and being able to find yourself in a home takes 3 steps. That means that we have to work harder at it. We can't just throw money. We have to ensure we're working with Canadians, with our municipalities, and with our provinces to move people out. The third step is affordable housing as a whole. This country is short 1.8 million homes compared to the median average of our G7 friends. And we know that affects supply. When we look at average affordable rental housing units or affordable rent, it has to be about $700 or $800. Now, I'm a hotelier. I built hotels in the past. And I can tell you that the travesty in our housing right now is we're not seeing affordability when it comes to building homes. The average affordable housing unit that I've seen in Canada is well over $280,000 a unit. In 2015, I built a hotel, it was a Town Place Marriott, for $135,000 a door. That's with a pool, that's ensuring there's a kitchen in each room, it's ensuring it had the utmost of everything you could have. But affordable housing is so expensive that it's $265,000 just to build a unit. And there's no way when a developer builds an affordable housing unit for $265,000 a unit that they can provide a rent that's $700 or $800. Even if they do 50%, even if they get all the funding from the CMHC, they still have to charge $1,200 to $1,500 plus for that rent. We have to find innovative ways that Canada can build affordable rental units so that our citizens can afford affordable market rent. Housing is a huge issue. It's top of my mind. I'm very passionate about it, but it's something that we need to invest in and spend more time in. And of course, shelter should come before dental care. Let's fix housing and make sure that's a priority. Okay. Food for our families. The average family spends more money in taxes than they do for food and shelter and housing in Canada, a G7 nation. And when we look at the fact that we have people lined up for our food banks and what we look to need to feed those farmers, or for those people, through our farmers. Our farmers are the most important part of that mechanism. Our farmers should be invested in and looked after. Instead, what we're hearing this week is farmers are paying $45,000 as an average to the carbon tax per year, but only getting back $862 as a rebate. So farmers, who we depend on to make our food, and by the way, by 2030, the world needs 1.5 times the food we have now. They need 50% more food. And who makes the food? Who have the animals? Who has the farmland? Who fishes? It's farmers, and it's our farming industry. They need to be invested in. They have great technologies that'll help them use soil to produce double the yields. They have good technologies that'll help them save on labor, because good luck finding laborists right now, finding employment with 1 million jobs open in this country. We need to invest in farmers and to make sure that's there. And my last point is job shortages. 1 million jobs short in this country, which is costing this country $30 billion and spiking inflation, because if you can't get someone to truck your food, make your food, and be there to serve your food, then inflation goes up because, you know what, you have less. More money, chasing less goods. That's a made in Canada problem. Madam Speaker, we need to invest in Canadians. Unfortunately, we have to make decisions, the hard decisions, to make sure we look after the basics. That means saying no to some things, looking at our future. We need doctors. We need laborists. We need to help our farmers. We need to make sure we get shelters and housing for our families. That's what we should be focusing on, and that's what Canadians need to be focused on in this government, and that's what we're going to do in this side of the House. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, the member makes reference to the issue of inflation, and there's no doubt there are a number of measures that we are taking because this government takes inflation very seriously, even though when you compare us to the United States, to England, to Europe, Canada has a lower inflation rate. So unlike what the Conservatives try to portray to Canadians, we are doing relatively well in comparison to the rest of the world. Having said that, we are bringing forward measures to provide relief to people that are going through the inflation, which is everyone. The bill we're debating today provides relief for renters, and it also, in the form of support, $500, and it also provides a framework for children under the age of 12 to get dental care. That's badly needed. Why is the Conservative Party not only voting against this legislation, but they're going to filibuster it?
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Well, thank you to the Parliamentary Secretary for the House Leader. It's very interesting, but I don't know how, when you're talking to your residents at the door and you're telling them that inflation is higher in UK, that's helping the family that has to choose between rent, groceries, and shelter. I don't understand how you think they understand that. Residents are hurting, and they want to hear relief for those top things. They want to know that their taxes are going to be lowered, and they're going to have more money in their back pocket at the end of the day. We can't spend all the money and do all the things and expect that these Canadians are going to be helped in all steps of the way. It's been proven. The Bank of Canada governor said that spending the money that we've spent, more money chasing less goods, has resulted in Canadians spending over $900 a month more than they did in 2019. So if your answer is to continue doing what we're doing, if you want to make it $1,800, $2,000, our answer is rein it in. Let's get focused.
I have to allow for more questions, but I also will remind the member that he's to address questions and comments through the chair and not directly to members. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I listened to my colleague who seems concerned about the matter of housing. I appreciate that. I think his comments on that are relevant. But then he says the government, well, we can't just spend money to resolve this issue. One of the problems now with the federal government's program is that a lot of money is being sent to private promoters to make housing that's expensive in Montreal. Housing that people who really need housing can't afford. At a certain point, the government will have to invest in building housing that people will be able to afford. What does he think of that?
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Merci beaucoup pour my...
Thank you very much to the Honourable Member.
A misnomer that government builds homes. Government doesn't build homes. People build homes. And so when I've talked to developers in our region, and I've spent a lot of time on housing, being a hotelier myself and building units, you know, the best programs that we can do for a government are 0% interest loans that allow developers to look at solutions that they can build and able to make sure they don't lose $1 million when they're building a unit, but allows them to hopefully to build more units that they then can offer for lower rents. I mean, rental is what we need. We talk about 1.8 million homes. When we talk about people finding themselves at our shelters, they need transitional housing, but it's rental. And the other big thing with hotels that we've learned, the more rental we have in Canada, if a landlord is stuck with an empty unit and there's 4 other empty units, they're going to lower a lower price point for that unit to rent it. We just need more of them. Let's help developers build more rental units. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Brief question. The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
The population of Nunavut is about 40,000 people. This bill, if passed, will help more than 2 million people. That is more than triple the amount of how many people that live in Nunavut. Why is the member against targeted measures that will help all these millions of people in Canada?
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my member from Nunavut. We're not. Yesterday, the Conservative government voted for targeted tax decreases to our most vulnerable. And you know, when we look at how we can help Canadians, we've looked at targeted measures. We just can't do all of them because at the end of the day, if families, and I know that the member from Nunavut spoke yesterday about the increase in costs of food, and in Nunavut, I believe it's the highest in the region. We need to look at that cost. I mean, when it looks at the broadest, most population, how do we help get food to none of it and to help those populations? So that, I think that's the bigger necessity, and I would focus more on that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Reprise le débat.
Resuming debate.